All right, all right. That's enough of that. Oh, man. Now, before we go to bed, I want to share with you guys something that I've never really spoke to anyone about. With you guys all being relatively new players in the game, I've been playing this game for over 6 years already. Now, there's some stuff that you guys don't know by playing this game. And I don't want you to repeat this. I'm not saying this to scare you, but I want you guys to be aware of the true horrors inside of emergency response, Liberty County. Now, 10 years ago, a fire tore through this small home on Maple Street. Neighbors said they woke up to screams and a sky that glowed red. Now, some firefighters called it an accident, but those who were there that night, they still hear and see the spirits that died in that house. The neighbors couldn't believe the fire spread so quick. They heard the sirens and looked outside their windows, and a handful of them quickly dialed 911 as fast as they could, but unfortunately the house was fully involved with fire in every room. And as the firefighters arrived on scene, they all kind of knew in the back of their mind that nobody's alive in that house. Nobody on Earth is able to survive all that smoke. And honestly, at this point, they're just fighting the fire to hopefully preserve the bodies inside. Now, the house belonged to a generally normal family, one kid and two parents. The locals said they were always friendly and never really had any bad relationships with anybody. Now, the firefighters couldn't really determine the cause of the fire because everything was burned so badly. All that was left was just charred walls. Now, the firefighters carried out the bodies of the burned victims, but each one was so burned to the point of beyond recognition, they couldn't even determine who was who. And as the neighbors watched the house burn to the ground, they couldn't help but think, what an awful thing that happened to this family. Why did this happen? But me, I think I know why. Sometimes people do things they can't explain, like they aren't in control. Personally, I think one of them set the house on fire knowing they would return to it in another life. And as these spirits watched from above, the firefighters carried the lifeless bodies out of the home. Now, during overhaul, the firefighters stated they had unexplained screams coming from bedrooms. They double-checked every room and they found nobody inside. It was almost like they were still there. But now, even 10 years later, if you drive by the same newly renovated home, you can still see the silhouettes of the victims in the windows of the house that once burned. Okay, so that was a pretty neat one. But let's do one that's a little more recent, shall we? So this one happened while you guys were in the game. All new players should have heard of this before. And now on this very night, 8 months ago, Officer Tyson responded to a 911 alarm at the local jewelry store. Now Tyson was a very skilled officer. He had 15 years of experience on the department and knew the city like the back of his hand. But unfortunately, with all that knowledge, one simple mistake changed his life forever. Now, the call came in as a panic alarm hit by a store employee. 3 armed criminals entered the back door of the facility. They shot the locks off the door and ran inside screaming commands. Now, the cashier had no other option but to comply. They held him at gunpoint and asked him to unlock all the cabinets. He had no other option. And as the criminals were looting the jewelry, the alarm sounded and the police responded with full force. Now, Officer Tyson was smart, so he went around back while the other units went to the front. He parked his car behind the criminals and waited for them to come out. His gun was drawn, his hands were shaking, and his eyes were locked on that back door. The criminals walked out, bags full of jewelry, ready to do anything just to get away. They shot Officer Tyson. He fell to the ground. He couldn't even key up his radio. The criminals took off, never to be seen again. He laid there screaming desperately for help, but help was on the other side of the building. By the time they got there, it was already too late. Now every month on that exact date, River City Dispatch receives a 911 for a man down. They trace the location, and they send officers out to investigate. But they always come back empty-handed with no other information. And the location the call comes from? It comes from the grave. Nobody has ever seen or heard from the criminals, and Officer Tyson's body remains untouched. Alright, I'm getting pretty tired, but I'm going to be honest, there's one more I need to tell you guys. And it begins in the same very woods we're in this exact moment. Now, there was once a sweeter old lady. Her name was Judy. Now, Judy loved nature. She loved hiking, going outside, and spending time in the sun. Now, one day, Judy decided to go on a hike, and she drove to these very woods to hike nature's most beautiful paths, not knowing that she would never step outside these woods ever again. Judy loved driving her white truck. She would treat it as if it was her own child, and nobody was allowed to drive it except her. She arrived at High Rock Park, and the ranger let her inside. She couldn't have asked for a more beautiful day to go hiking. It was perfect. And as she turned onto those trails, a deep fog overcame the park fast. Nobody could see anything. The rangers put out a fog advisory, and to shelter in places it was too dangerous to drive. Nobody heard from Judy for days. The rangers set out a search team, and late at night they found the white truck. It was crashed into a tree. They looked inside and found nothing. No blood, no airbags, no Judy. It looked like she just parked it and wandered off, or maybe she didn't care anymore. The rangers continued to search for her night and day. They patrolled all night into deep parts in the woods, hoping to discover anything at all. And after days of searching, they found something. But to their surprise, it wasn't a clue. It was Judy's scream. It disturbed the campers severely. They would call the park rangers, reporting of screaming coming from the woods. The rangers didn't know what to do. It was the same thing over and over again. But by law, they have to go look for something, right? Even if they discover nothing. They looked tirelessly through any weather conditions, hoping to find something, at least her body. But on one stormy night, Judy's scream echoed just a little bit louder than usual. But you know, those are just myths and all stories. But for me, I think I truly believe them. And if you don't, then you should go see for yourself.